Luster, disappointing, downright embarrassing ratings that Unrivaled has had so far this season. It must have hurt Annie's heart when she started seeing these ratings in such a bad place, and she was like, damn, I can't ignore this. This is so bad, I just can't ignore it. I have to talk about it. Damn, it hurt. Folks, the elephant in the room is the bad Unrivaled ratings.
Do you know how bad the ratings have to be to get the pro WNBA media to actually admit there's a problem? These are the same outlets that spin every story into a positive narrative. The same writers who turn 90,000 viewers into a success story. But even they can't ignore this anymore. Unrivaled's second season ratings didn't just drop, they plunged. And that word choice matters, because it came directly from Annie Costabile, one of the league's most protective voices. When even the cheerleaders start calling it what it is, you know the situation is dire.
Slate. Damn, not a slight drop, not a subtle drop, a steep drop. That's, boom, that's what Max Kellerman would say, falling off a cliff. As the league's second season continues, viewership will be a big factor in its sustainability. Damn. Even using some Napheesa Collier buzzwords?
Let's put actual numbers to this disaster. Opening weekend on January 5th averaged 755,000 viewers across TNT and truTV for the two games that aired on both networks. The truTV exclusive games that same day, 32,000 viewers, 32,000 people watching professional basketball on a major cable network. College volleyball tournaments pulled better numbers than that. But here's where it gets worse. By January 10th and 11th, the four games that aired averaged just 71,000 viewers on truTV. That's not a drop. That's a free fall. Compare that to last season. Year 1 averaged 221,000 viewers across the regular season and playoffs on TNT. The championship final peaked at 77,000 viewers. So we're looking at a 70 to 80% decline in some time slots. A steep drop doesn't cover it. This is catastrophic.
In the inaugural season, Unrivaled was a spectacle, drawing a sold-out crowd of 870 eager eyes hungry for basketball to watch during the WNBA offseason. The new format was intriguing, and the salaries and player accommodations that rivaled the WNBA's were cause for fan celebration. In year 2, the sparkle has worn off. Oh no, not the sparkle.
Now they'll tell you it's the competition. NFL wildcard weekend, college football playoffs, tough broadcast window.
And sure, that's a factor.
But let's be honest about what that excuse really means. It means Unrivaled can't compete for casual viewers. The die-hard WNBA fans will watch anything, were already there last season. This year, they needed to grow the audience. Instead, they lost the audience they had, and before anyone says, but HBO Max, those numbers aren't measured by Nielsen, because they're negligible. If streaming was saving them, Warner Brothers Discovery would be shouting those numbers from the rooftops. The silence tells you everything you need to know.
And most concerningly, for the second-year league, ratings on TNT were lackluster. Unrivaled's opening slate on January 5th, which kicked off with a Monday afternoon game, embarrassing, averaged 175,000 viewers in the two games that aired both on TNT and truTV. The two truTV exclusive games on January 5th averaged 32,000 viewers. Games on January 9th averaged 130.
Here's what makes this particularly devastating. Unrivaled expanded from 36 players to 54 players in year 2. They added more teams, more games, more content. In any normal business model, expansion means you've proven the concept and you're scaling up, but their ratings went in the opposite direction. They grew the supply while demand collapsed. Think about what that means financially. More players means more salaries. More teams means more operational costs. More games means more production expenses. And all of that is happening while the revenue side is cratering. The math doesn't work.
To its first season, when the league averaged 221,000 viewers on TNT across the regular season and playoffs, peaking at 377,000 viewers for the final of the one-on-one tournament. The opening night last season averaged 312,000 viewers across TNT and True TV. The 2026 games face a competitive broadcast window with the NFL wildcard round and the college football playoff. We talked about that earlier today. The people watching the NFL wildcard and college football playoff, not the same people.
The 6-year media rights deal with TNT is reportedly worth 9 figures. Sounds impressive until you read the fine print. Warner Bros. Discovery can opt out after 3 years. We're heading into year 2 and the ratings are down 70% in some slots. You think they're not having conversations about that exit clause right now? TNT also has equity in the league, which means they're invested beyond just the broadcast rights. But equity in a league that can't draw viewers is worthless. At some point, Warner Bros. Discovery has to look at their portfolio and ask whether this is worth the continued investment, especially now that they've lost NBA rights. Unrivaled was supposed to help fill that basketball void. Instead, it's becoming a liability.
These aren't built overnight. Now here we go. Before we were hip to this league, you might have gotten one over on people saying these are the best players in the world, but now we know better. Now we know they're not the best players in the world. Now we know that many of the best players in the world chose not to play in Unrivaled this season. We know that many of the best players in Unrivaled last season refused to come back for a second season, so you can't really pull the same.
And then there's the player exodus. Brianna Stewart tried to spin it as players making different choices, finding what works for their development. But let's call it what it is. Multiple stars from year 1 chose not to come back. They played 3-on-3 for 1 season, collected their checks, and decided it wasn't worth returning. Alyssa Thomas said it outright in the article. 3-on-3 made it harder to transition back to 5-on-5. She actually enjoyed playing overseas. Think about that. A player explicitly saying she prefers the overseas experience to Unrivaled. That's not the narrative the league wants out there, but it's the truth.
Here, in the league of sports, people are typically used. We got over what Brianna Stewart said earlier. Unrivaled has other ways to make money, chiefly ticket and merch sales. Despite empty seats in Florida, a league spokesperson said that every opening weekend game was sold out. Let me get this straight. This is just me. I'm only speaking by my experience. Every time I bought tickets to a sporting event, I have showed up 100% of the time. Whether it's Major League Baseball,
The merchandise sales being up 50% sounds good until you realize they're measuring from September through opening weekend. That's 4 months of sales compared to the same period last year when the league was brand new and had 0 brand recognition. Of course, year 2 merchandise sales are higher. You're comparing an established product to a startup. That's not growth. That's basic business progression. And ticket revenue being up 40% for opening weekend is entirely because of the Philadelphia games. They're playing at Wells Fargo Center, which holds between 17 and 20,000 people depending on configuration. Those tickets were reselling for $23 as of the article date. But here's the problem. That's a novelty event. It's the WNBA's Canada strategy all over again. Take the product to a new market that's starved for it, get one big crowd, then never return because the demand won't sustain.
Fuck it. I got better shit to do. The thought was better than the action. The thought of going to an Unrivaled game, I'm not going to go to an Unrivaled game. The league will also feature a tour stop in Philadelphia, which stands to pay dividends. The 2-game slate on January 30th will be played at Xfinity Mobile Arena, which has a capacity roughly between 17,000 and 20,000 fans, depending on...
The opening weekend games in Miami were technically sold out, according to the league spokesperson. But if you watched the broadcasts, you saw empty seats everywhere. So either people bought tickets and didn't show up, or the league is playing games with what sold out means. Maybe they're counting distributed tickets. Maybe they're counting comped seats. Either way, the optics are terrible. And that matters because Unrivaled's entire pitch is about the in-person experience. The campus. The intimate venue. The fan fest. When your signature feature is the live atmosphere and the building looks half empty on television, you've got a credibility problem.
November. Quote, I think there's a misconception that we don't want to be overseas. Oh, really? Do tell. For me, it's about where the best opportunity is, where I can continue to grow my future. I enjoyed overseas. There's plenty of opportunities over here. Unrivaled is an opportunity as well. 3-on-3 for me, I felt was a little harder to transition back into 5v5. So you're telling me, Alyssa Thomas, thank you for letting us all know. You're telling me that all the people telling us that nobody wants to play overseas.
CEO Alex Berselli gave the standard corporate response. We're building for the long game. Leagues aren't built overnight, which is true, but also irrelevant. The question isn't whether leagues take time to build. The question is whether this specific league has a viable path to sustainability. And right now, the answer is no. You can't lose 70% of your audience in year 2 and claim you're on the right track. You can't hemorrhage star players and say everything's fine. You can't watch your media partner lose NBA rights and assume your deal is safe. At some point, building for the long game becomes a euphemism for we don't have answers.
100,000 viewers? Not sustainable. Lack of excitement, lack of engagement, lack of conversation? Not sustainable. Adding more players? It's not sustainable. It is what it is. People are calling a spade, of course. Week 2 ratings just came out. 105,000 people on Friday overall watched that slumber party league. It's finished. Fee put her foot in the mouth, and it's hurting CBA negotiations because she is delusional, thinking that Unrivaled is something special.
Brianna Stewart's comment about wanting ratings to be consistently high, no matter if we play on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, is particularly tone-deaf. The ratings aren't inconsistently high, they're consistently low. The day of the week isn't the problem. The product is the problem. And her point about having a space of our own here in the League of Sports people are typically used to actually works against them. Yes, you have your own space. That space is 3-on-3 basketball in January and February. And it turns out not many people want to occupy that space with you. Creating a new category doesn't matter if there's no demand for that category.
Was she? Annie, thank you so much for giving us an article that has some meat on the bones. That's not just pro player. That's being pretty transparent in the ratings. I do appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. That would mean so much to me. See you next time, and as always, take it easy.
Here's what makes this entire situation so fascinating. Unrivaled was supposed to be the solution to the WNBA's off-season problem. Players go overseas because WNBA salaries aren't enough. So create a domestic league that pays well and keeps players in the United States. Simple, right? Except it's not simple at all. Because the reason overseas leagues can pay WNBA players 6 figures is because basketball is massively popular in those countries. Russia, Turkey, China, these are markets where women's basketball has genuine fan bases. The money is there because the demand is there. Unrivaled tried to create the supply side without the demand side. They paid players well, built a fancy facility, secured a media deal, and assumed viewers would follow. But American sports fans have the NFL, NBA, college basketball, college football, hockey, and a dozen other options competing for their attention in January and February. 3-on-3 women's basketball, featuring players most casual fans have never heard of, was never going to break through that noise. The WNBA itself only averaged 1.2 million viewers per game this season. And that was with Caitlin Clark driving unprecedented interest. Unrivaled is getting a fraction of that without Clark, without the storylines of a full season, and without the legitimacy of a decades-old league. The math never made sense. What's particularly interesting is how this impacts the WNBA's CBA negotiations. Napheesa Collier and Brianna Stewart are both Unrivaled co-founders and WNBA Players Association leadership. Their entire negotiating position has been that players have other options, that they don't need the WNBA, that alternative leagues prove their market value is higher than what WNBA teams are paying. But if Unrivaled can't sustain itself, that argument collapses. The leverage disappears. WNBA owners can point to these ratings and say, see, the market doesn't support higher salaries because the demand isn't there. And they'd be right. Unrivaled was supposed to strengthen the players' negotiating position. Instead, it might be doing the opposite. It's demonstrating that without the WNBA infrastructure, without the established fan bases, without the media relationships built over decades, women's basketball in America struggles to find an audience. That's not the story the players wanted to tell, but it's the story these ratings are telling. The Philadelphia experiment will be interesting to watch. If they sell out Wells Fargo Center and create a genuine atmosphere, the league will point to it as proof of concept. But one successful event doesn't prove sustainability. The question is whether they can do it again in the same city 6 months later. The question is whether the novelty wears off. The question is whether people show up when it's not the shiny new thing anymore. Based on what we're seeing in Miami, where year 2 attendance and viewership are dramatically down from year 1, the answer is probably no. The curiosity factor brought people in initially, but once they saw the product, most of them decided not to come back. And that's really the core issue here. It's not about the competition from NFL playoffs. It's not about the day of the week. It's not about marketing or promotion or media coverage. It's about the product itself. 3-on-3 basketball doesn't resonate with American audiences the way 5-on-5 does. The games feel like exhibitions, not meaningful competition. The stakes feel artificial, and no amount of production value or player salary or celebrity ownership can fix that fundamental problem. So where does Unrivaled go from here? They're locked into year 2, and they'll complete the season. The Philadelphia event will give them 1 weekend of positive headlines. But year 3 is when the real reckoning comes. That's when Warner Bros. Discovery has to decide whether to opt out. That's when players have to decide whether to commit again. That's when the financial reality becomes impossible to ignore. My prediction? Warner Bros. Discovery opts out after year 3. The league either folds or dramatically scales back, maybe becoming a summer league with lower salaries and smaller venues. Some players will point to it as a noble experiment that just didn't work out. Others will quietly admit it was always more about leverage in WNBA negotiations than building a sustainable league. But here's what won't change: the fundamental economics of women's basketball in America. The audience is growing, but it's still relatively small. The WNBA has spent 28 years building to the point where they can average 1 million viewers per game in a good season. Unrivaled thought they could shortcut that process with money and star power. These ratings prove they were wrong. The biggest question is whether this failure damages the WNBA's growth trajectory. Does it make sponsors more cautious? Does it make media partners more skeptical? Does it reinforce negative perceptions about the viability of women's basketball? Or does it actually help the WNBA by demonstrating that their league is the only sustainable option, that players need the WNBA more than the WNBA needs any individual player? Time will tell, but one thing is certain: the narrative around Unrivaled has fundamentally shifted. This is no longer a story about innovation and player empowerment. It's a story about miscalculation and market reality, and no amount of spin from pro-WNBA media can change what these ratings are screaming. Nobody's watching. So what do you think? Is Unrivaled salvageable, or is this league already dead and just doesn't know it yet? Can they turn it around in year 3, or is Warner Bros. Discovery already planning their exit? And what does this mean for the WNBA players who bet their credibility on this experiment? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and let's see how this plays out over the next few months. Because one way or another, this story is far from over.